Well, as you can pretty much guess, we are going to continue our study as we are looking at what we're calling monsters, or areas that we come across that Satan uses to block us or to deaden us to live the freedom and the fullness of what God's intended for us. These areas that, quite frankly, sometimes we embrace, that keep us from the fullness and the freedom of what Christ wants for us, sometimes without even fully realizing it. And we're looking at these to be able to shine light on them, get into the Word on them, and see what God has to be able to spur us forward. So far, we have talked about two. We've talked about pride and we talked about fear over the last couple of weeks. And as always, those are available. If you missed it on our church website, you can go to our podcast or our YouTube channel page and be able to catch up on those. But today we're going to move into the third one, which is lust. Now, lust, again, well, I think a lot of times when we think about lust, we automatically think of sensual lust. And that's fitting, but it's not full. There's definitely many areas of lust, even though sensual lust would be kind of at the forefront of that. But pretty much any time that we are in a place where I want what I want, especially in a place that kind of drives me for that, then there's a good shot we're getting into lust. We're getting into an aspect that maybe might be a twist of what God desired for us that leads us into some harmful places. So we're going to dig into that, and then next week we'll kind of bring everything together through an action. But I want to make sure that we get into this today. So if you would, let's go ahead and get our Bibles out. And we're going to go to a third minor prophet as we go to Hosea chapter 1 and dig into what's going on with the Israelites yet again. If you've not been here, how we've been addressing these particular areas is we've been studying what we call the minor prophets. There's 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. So if you're looking for this guy, he's after Psalms, before Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's a short book, so don't be afraid to use your concordance if you'd like to be able to get there. Most of these are small because that's why we call them the minor prophets. It's not that they had minor messages. We just have shorter windows into their lives and shorter messages from them that definitely pertain to the type of things we're talking about. And by getting into the minor prophets, what that lets us do is look at a period of time with the Israelites and the things that they struggled with. This would be the people that God chose to be his people so that the rest of the world could see the relationship between the two of them and he can draw the whole world to him. But like any community, then or now, there are going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. And we're going to find that we're really looking at the Israelites during a really bad season of their life. It's after the golden age where they were really close to God, really lean into God, their leaders were leaning into God. But after Solomon's death, we find that there is a split amongst the people, and they go to two different regions of the land that God gave them. So we're going to do a little bit of history lesson yet again to kind of make sure that we're all in the same ballpark, because we can't understand the fullness of the message without understanding the fullness of the context. So when they split, they had the area of land. Those who went to the north still called themselves Israel, and they had the capital city of Samaria, and they did not follow God. Do you remember us talking about that? They just kind of abandoned that. They didn't last but for a few hundred years before judgment came against them. Whenever you step out of God's will, it puts you in the funky places he never intended for you, and it doesn't go well. And that, they found that to be true. Those who went to the south were they called Judah, and they would follow God sometimes and sometimes not, just depending on who the leader was at that time. And most of our focus up to this point has been centered around Judah. 2 weeks ago, when we looked at pride, Obadiah was used to speak to the neighboring country of Edom and the pride that they had when Judah did fall because of their sin and how Edom handled themselves in that situation. Last week, we jumped ahead 60 years where those from Judah that had been taken away were allowed to go back and to start building the temple again, and it didn't go very well because of fear. And so God sent prophecy into that to be able to speak into that. Well, today we're not going to stay in Judah, but we're going to go up north back to Israel. And we're not just going back up north, we're going to go back in time. That these things are a little bit further advanced, and this was going to go back to all the way back to the 8th century BC of what's going on in the northern region. And the 8th century for them is really kind of a unique time, interesting time, because as you go into the beginning of the 8th century, what we find is they were doing really, really, really well from the standpoint of the world. They had peace, they had prosperity, they had money, they had wealth, they had a lot of comfort, and things from, again, a world perspective was going beautifully. However, they were struggling with lust. Because they love this life, because they like this comfort, they start having a lust for it to the point of I want what I want, and they started forgetting the things of God and embracing their own ways instead. For instance, what we find within this culture is that they had a severe struggle that those who had no interest of taking of their excess and helping those who did not have. That was not the way God built society. Now, I want to re-say that again because you guys know me. I don't talk about politics, but I'll talk about issues behind politics. God had an issue because they lusted for their comfort zone to the point that they didn't give of their excess to help people that were in need, and God said that was not okay. Another area they came into when it came to their lust was the way that they pretty much just abandoned God, and they rose up for themselves idols that really didn't bring them any challenge, but let them feel good about what they brought as far as sacrifices. And I think we see that in our world today as well. Well, maybe not necessarily do we have a bunch of us driving around with cars that have little fat guys without a shirt on, statues and our dashboard type thing, you know what I mean? But when it comes to money, when it comes to our schedule, when it comes to our desires of what we want to do with our time, definitely idol worship, anything that we put before God, is a struggle that we can have as well. And they were leaning into that from a lust standpoint. Another thing that they had going on that was a result of that lust for comfort was they started blending religions and worldly thought to create their own personal religions so that they felt good about themselves. They would basically look at the different options of beliefs and say, okay, well, I'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and this seems good to me, so I'll slap that in here, and this is my personal truth. And it was so rampant that basically when they looked at each other, they would not say, no, wait, that's weird. You can't just make up a truth. You're going to be seeking truth. They would look at each other and say, well, if that works for you, then that's your truth. And my truth is this. And it's, oh, okay, as long as that works for you, then that's your truth. And pretty much everything I just mentioned we see in our culture. And everything I just mentioned we see within the church, within our culture, if we're not careful. It's easy to slip into these things. And I think God wants to address those because He's very adamant about us having the truth and not our own made-up truth. He's very adamant about us having freedom and purpose instead of Satan watering things down in our lives because of lust. This is true with Israel. By the time we get to the middle of the century, we have where the Assyrians come in and they defeat Israel and they wipe them out and they take them as an act of oppression, and they no longer have their freedom. So by the end of that 50 years at mid-mark, we find that they lost that comfort, they lost their idols, they lost their wealth, they lost all the things that they put their hope into. Now, these things don't happen overnight. As we talked about before, when we're on the wrong path, God reaches out. He will reach out time and time and time again. Laying somebody out is God's last plan because He loves you so much that He won't let you stay in bondage. But He definitely reaches out. And this is what happens when we come along the message of Hosea and what he has to share. So let's talk a little bit about what happens before the judgment comes into place and God is trying to reach out to them and what kind of message they bring into place. In chapter 1, verse 1, you're going to see that the word of the Lord comes to Hosea. And we haven't talked about this a whole heck of a lot, but I spent some time, this is back during my pastoral studies, really wondering what would it be like to be a guy, just an everyday guy, and then God decides you're going to be a prophet and you hear the word of God for the first time. And it gives you some kind of like overwhelming message. It tells you to go out and tell everybody. You're going to be an intercessor. You're going to be raised up. Like, I wonder what kind of emotions would go on when you get hit with that for the first time. Has anybody ever thought about that? I remember I did a report where I had to write a first-person report about someone in that era, someone in that range. And the whole report was on Amos, because Amos was just a sycamore tree farmer. If you ever look at his story, he literally just raised trees. And God goes, hey, here's this massive word that I want for my people of this massive judgment coming. So if you can go tell that 5 million people that I'm about to come against them because of their sin, I'd appreciate that. And I'd have to think Amos would be like, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, what a massive change in life, what a massive responsibility. And I actually wrote about Amos going and talking to his daddy. Like, Dad, you're not going to believe what's going on. And him and his dad having this conversation, because I would think there would have to be some excitement, but also have some fear, depending on who the prophet was, depending on the personality, depending on the circumstances. So here we have Hosea getting the word coming to him for the very first time. And there's some things that we know about him that it doesn't make it overly surprising. Hosea's name means salvation. Hosea is a righteous man in the midst of this country that has very much turned their back on God. But it is a little bit different in his story because it's one of the first times we come across a prophet where, from a theologian standpoint, most believe that he was about 18 or 19 years old instead of older in life. So he doesn't necessarily have a lot of life experience, but we find time and time again he's very quick to follow whatever God says without any argument. And that's not just because it's a Bible thing. We see a lot of people struggling with God. This guy was on it. So he's there, he's ready, he receives the word. I would imagine that he's pretty pumped about this, concerned about his nation, concerned about his country. And the question becomes, what prophecy, what thing does God have to share to Hosea? We find this in verse 2. It says, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. Now, if you really open yourself up to what God just said to him, I would not blame him if his first response was, what now? Right? I know. Give me a word. I'll go take that my word. But what you're telling me you want me to go marry an easy woman who pretty much everybody in town knows, and when I mean knows means they know, right? And you want me to have children of whoredom, and I'm just going to kind of avoid that word because it's a good word, but with my lack of R's, it really is confusing, isn't it? But nonetheless, you want me to go do this. Now, when we have God tell us to do something, we want it to be like something like, okay, you want me to go be a missionary, right? Or you want me to go be a teacher, or you want me to go take and be an executive that shows people what true integrity and following Christ looks like. Here he tells him, I literally want you to go marry a woman who is going to be unfaithful to you, that everybody knows sleeps around, and start a family. That is huge. That's overwhelming. This young guy, righteous guy, wants to do what's right by God. Go marry a whore. What this is called is a speech out. We find it several times within the scripture, especially within the prophets, where God calls the prophet to do something tangible that serves as a metaphor, as a living lesson to those who are watching. And so we find in verse 3 that he goes out, he takes Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, okay, and she conceived and bore him a son. So immediately we don't see Hosea saying, God, I don't want to do that. God, what will people think? God, what does that mean for all my plans? He goes out, he marries a woman with one of the worst possible biblical names of all time, and he starts having a family with her. Because God wants to show the people what he sees instead of what they have justified it to be. Basically, because you guys are married to me, you're my people, but yet you continue to have affairs with all these other areas of lust. This is really what that looks like. You are taking and cheating on God, and you are having children out of those affairs that are ripple effects of your sin that's not pleasant. And so we start taking and having this record of some of the children that come into this family. And this first one, at the end of verse 3, it talks about that she conceived and bore Hosea's son. And God tells him, name the son Jezreel. And then God continues to it by saying, there's a reason I want you to name the boy Jezreel. It's because I am going to break my vow with you in the valley of Jezreel. There's a reason for the name. It's not because it's easy to get the monograms. It's not because it's cute. It's because I am going to break my vow with you. And that would make the entire nation completely overwhelmed, afraid, disconnected, and lose their identity. Their whole purpose has been to be the people of God. He has made a vow back from Abraham all the way through the generations to be our God and to go with us. But because they repeatedly had adulterous affairs on God by breaking the vow over and over again, he says, what you deserve is for the vow to be gone altogether. From there, she conceives and she bears a daughter. The daughter's name is, I'm going to hack this probably, but she's no longer around, so she can't be mad. Luruma, I will say, but it translates to this, no mercy. First off, the one thing I want you to notice is it does not say that she conceives and bears him a daughter. The son was his. The daughter is not. This is a daughter that comes from the seed of another man. This is the result of one of the affairs. And God says, I want you to name her No Mercy, because what you deserve is no mercy. The wages of sin is what? Death. We deserve no mercy. Because I just want to make that clear through these children. You're breaking the vow, I'll break the vow. You deserve no mercy. And if we're not getting the point yet, then she conceives and bears another son, once again not Hosea's son, and his name translates to not my people. They're not my people. You ever had that situation, you're at home, if you're a husband and wife, maybe you got some kids and the kids are acting up, and you go in and you say to your spouse, your kids are doing this and your kids are doing that, they're no longer mine, right? God says, you're not my people. You don't deserve mercy. You've broken the vow so much, I'll break the vow. And there's an immense, heavy judgment that comes on them because of lust and because of the affairs that they've been having. And I think we have to rest there for a second, because I'll tell you what we want to run to is grace, what we want to run to is mercy. We want to say, well, that's not a problem because I accepted Jesus as leader and forgiver of my life. These people were his people. What he's saying is, let's talk about how serious the situation is. When you would not follow me, you would not lean into me, when you're putting yourself into bondage, you're disconnecting yourself from me. And that was never his plan, that was never his way. And lust is very serious to God. Let me talk just for a second. We'll take a break from Hosea's story. And I want we'll put this up on the screen for you. Not the definition, but just the one slide I talked to you about lust. And there was just some points that came up to me as I was reflecting on this week about some common denominators, no matter what lust that you're dealing with. First thing that I was thinking about is whenever lust comes into your life, when it's kind of in its infant form, it really does a lot of times come in like a lamb. It really does come in with some justification, and I'll kind of play that out as we talk about some examples. From there, we start to find that lust starts to change our focus, where it's all about pleasing the self. It's all about Tom. It's all about what I want or I need. Then we find that lust grows in darkness. When it's hidden, when we ignore it, when we don't want other people to find out. Then we find that it usually, if not always, reduces the worth of others in our lives because of our self-focus. And by the end, it ravishes like a lion. Ravishes like a lion. It's a bondage that comes into place. So let's take an example. We're going to leave that up for a little bit and kind of walk through what that looks like. Since lust is usually thought of from a sensual standpoint, let's start with the sensual lust. And there's a lot of different sensual lusts out there, whether that be same gender or opposite gender, whether that be premarital or extramarital, whether that be people that have a marriage but they believe in having other partners or swinging, whether that be someone that's struggling with pedophilia, that's a sensual lust. There's a lot of different lusts that people can struggle with when it comes to us being born into sin and struggling. I will use, for an example, pornography. Pornography is one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but holy cow, does it have a lot of bondage in a lot of people's lives. Inside the church, outside the church. Men, women. It's a huge issue when it comes to lust. And if we look at that from that standpoint, usually it enters like a lamb. It's not that you start out with having some kind of addiction to pornography. Usually, somebody who is struggling with pornography will have a simpler story than that. And a lot of times it's childhood. I remember probably the first time that I saw a nudie magazine. I can't remember if it was my neighbor's dad's, because he had Playboy stash beside his bed and his coffee table that was unguarded. Or if it was the guy about 4 houses down from us, he had like a man's den inside his garage that was detached from the house, and he would leave magazines in there all the time, and it really wasn't all that hard to take one home for a couple of days, and he would never notice the difference. Doesn't sound that overwhelming, no more than an alcoholic talking about how I'd like to have a couple of beers during the game. There's usually some kind of story that we think are innocent, or that's just kids being kids. Today, pornography is so unbelievably accessible for free through the internet. that's there, that there's some real challenges that come into play. So there's a lot of stories of how it comes in, and you just kind of say kids will be kids or something of that nature. But as it grows, basically what it's talking about is I want to please me. There is nothing within this that says I want to invest into the life of another person. What God invested us into is loving one another. This has nothing to do with one another. This all has to do with me. What I want, when I want it. And basically, sometimes you're looking at pornography as if it's some kind of catalog that you get to choose who you like, what kind of body types, those type of things. You're making complete and total judgments off of somebody else. It has nothing to do with their personality, their worth, or what God has put into them. So it's all about pleasing the self, and it grows in the darkness. It goes in the darkness. Maybe for a lot of people, those stories start with just kids and a couple of friends, those type of things. That's not usually how it continues. It usually is going to continue either you hiding, or you and the person that you're dating or married to hiding that you're using pornography in your life, that there's a growing addiction within your life. And just like mold, we just dealt with mold back here, right, Ray? Just like mold, it grows in the dark. When you expose light on it, it does not grow, but it grows in the dark. When the family goes to bed and no one's watching what I'm doing with my laptop, when the family goes to bed and I can take and pull up this movie and then delete it from the history afterwards, we're living in dark, and that's where it grows. It reduces the worth of others. When I talk to somebody who's been struggling with pornography, especially if it's been for years, they start having struggles of even walking down the middle of the mall, of how they see members of the opposite sex, if they're an object or if they're a person. You start seeing people judge so much by, I like this type of body type versus this type, and she would be really hot if she just had larger this or smaller that. All of a sudden, we start devaluing other people because we don't see them for who they are. We start seeing them as an object, and it ends up ravishing like a lion. I'm telling you, just from the numbers, there's a good chunk of us in this room that knows what I'm talking about when it says it's ravishing like a lion. The addictions, the relationship issues, the intimacy issues that you end up having, because pornography is not love. It will grab a hold of you and it will become addiction. And it will impact your relationships. Not just the people that you're dating, but your friendships as well. Lust isn't just sensual, though. There's other areas that we have that follow this model. If you have a lust for power, and you're trampling people as you're climbing up that ladder at work, you're going to find these same things come into play as far as how you devalue others, how it grows in the darkness, the type of tactics that you will move into. We're going to see these type of things coming into play if you're talking about popularity and wanting to be at the cool kids table. And I'm not just talking to all junior high and high schoolers about that. A lot of us in our adult years, quite frankly, still struggle with the same issues we had back then. Addictions, any addiction that you can think of pretty much falls into this pattern, does it not? Alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, any other thing that can take and bring you into your knees is a lust at some point that starts innocently, that grows to being out of control. Idolatry, anything I put before God falls into this. Anything I hide that I hope that other people in the church around me don't find out about that's in my life can fall into this. And so we start justifying, and it causes separation from God. We like to ignore it, but it causes separation from God. We walk away from Him. He doesn't walk away from us. What we deserve is no mercy. And we should rest there for a second. What we do is we separate ourselves from Him, and we're not acting in accordance to being His people. Not my kids. Not my kids. Chapter 2, verse 1. What we all want to get to is grace. God tells him, say to your brothers, you are my people. Say to your sisters, you have received mercy. Right after this hard, heavy, appropriate message of the names of these three kids from the most dysfunctional family we're ever going to find, God says, but then say to one another, I'll give you my mercy anyways. I'll still claim you as my people anyways. I still love you. Basically, whenever you have reconciliation, someone has to take and be in submission, but someone also has to sacrifice. And God says, I will sacrifice what I owe, or what you owe me, and I will still call you my people, and I will give you my mercy. I love that. I love that, because that's where the good news starts coming in place of Jesus Christ. That's where it all starts coming together. If we continue our story, going over to chapter 3 of Gomer and Hosea, what we're going to find is Gomer got so desperate and so overwhelmed and so much in bondage when it came to her lust that she ended up selling herself into slavery. And I know that sounds crazy. Why would anybody sell themselves into slavery? But brother, sister, you and I sell ourselves into slavery every time that we say yes to the lust. Every time that we say yes to sin, it's selling ourselves into slavery. So she leaves her family, leaves her kids, and Hosea's raising all these kids, if they're his or not, and she goes, and she's now completely and totally overwhelmed. And God decides to speak into this situation as well of what happens when we find ourselves in that place. Verse 1, it says, the Lord said to me, go again. Love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turned to other gods and loved cakes of raisins. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lettich of barley. And I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. This in action is the good news of Jesus Christ. I would have to wonder when Gomer is there and she's sold herself into slavery and everything is falling apart and everything is overwhelming, and Hosea walks into the room, what she must think that he's going to do. Is he going to look at me in judgment? Is he going to tear me down? Is he going to laugh at me? Is he going to say that's what you deserved the whole time? And if I was Hosea, I'd be wondering, do I really want her back? But God says, this is an opportunity to show you, 2,000, 3,000 years later, my love. Here's what you do. Go and sacrifice for her. What we know is at this time, the price for a slave is 30 shekels of silver. What did he give? 15. Plus barley, plus other things. What that's saying to us is he didn't have the money that it took to buy her back. So he had to sacrifice more. Here's all my money. Here's extra stuff that you have. What kind of deal we can have? Because I need to make her free again. He sacrificed for her, even though she had turned her back to it. Jesus Christ gave his all. When you and I were in bondage and sin, Jesus Christ gave his all, gave his blood on the cross, took the torture, took the crucifixion, was victorious through the resurrection over sin and over death, so that he could buy your freedom. If you've not entered into that, this is simply all you have to do, is say, my life's yours. I believe you're the Son of God. I know that you died and rose for me, and I want you to be in charge. I don't want to play these games that these guys are. I want to be your people. I need your mercy. And it's a done deal. That's how easy he made it. That's how easy Hosea made it. But understand it's a real thing. I mean, this is a real change, because he didn't just go in and said, I bought you, and gosh, I sure do hope that you don't sleep around anymore. He says, no, I redeemed you, and you're coming home, and we're going to have a real family, and you're not going to sin anymore. The exact same message that Jesus gave to the woman who was brought to him, the adulterous woman, to be stoned to death. And once he addressed the crowd and they realized their sin and they walked away, what did he say to her as she was crushed on the floor, thinking that she was going to be stoned to death? Is there anyone here to condemn you? No, my Lord. Then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Live in that freedom. Don't let lust continue to rule in your life. There's a quote from a book. It's called Interpreting the Prophetic Word by William Van Gomeren, and he writes this. He says, true repentance calls for submission to the Lord. It is not enough to live by a portion of God's revelation and to reject another. People may not enter into an area of restoration until they completely abandon their former ways, that they submit to God, and they express loyalty to the King of Kings, Jesus. put up on the screen just a couple pointers, some things that if there's an area of your life that you're finding or you're struggling with lust, things that we can do to move forward from it once he puts that on our hearts, once we have that conviction. The first one I would give you is kill it early. If you see that you're dabbling with a cute little story of struggling with pornography or struggling with pride or struggling with the different areas, kill it while it's a lamb. It is so much easier to take out a lamb than it is a lion. If you can do some of these other steps early on, you will be successful and save yourself years of pain. Years of pain if you can kill it early. Bring it into the light. It cannot grow in the light. When I say bring it into the light, if there's an area that you are struggling with, even if it's at the lion level, find 2, 3, 4 people that you can say, I'm struggling. I need to bring this into the light. I can't keep hiding this over here anymore. I need to bring it into the light. Choose those people wisely. And we're going to talk about that again here in a little bit when we're talking about this team. You do not want to choose someone and have them be your only one if they're struggling with the same issue that you're struggling with. Okay? You still with me? If you're struggling with pornography and somebody else says, boy, I know what you're talking about. I spend 16 hours a day on pornography. Might not be the best person to partner with to be your strong one. Because it's much easier to go, really? What sites do you get on? Oh my goodness, can I tell you about this site? And all of a sudden, right? You with me? If you are struggling in an area of lust, let's say within extramarital affair, you met somebody that gets you. Your spouse just doesn't get you. They get you. They understand. And you want to go out and have lunch with them and talk about your marriage problems. You are already so messed up. Do not do that. And can I tell you, absolutely, they are not the one to go to and say, I'm happily married. I love but I just want to let you know I've been attracted to you for 2 years. Stupid. One or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to pull away from you because you just weirded them out, or worse, I've been attracted to you too. And you've already lost half the battle. But if you can find people who love the Lord and love you and are committed to your discipleship as you're committed to theirs, you need people that you can talk to and say, I messed up again, and not be embarrassed to say I messed up again. Or someone that can ask you, have you been getting on to, what Cinemax? What a fun little network that you should not have. You've been getting on Cinemax at 1 o'clock in the morning. I messed up again. You need somebody that's going to be there that helps you bring it to the light. Create healthy boundaries. Especially if you're on a lion level of this, do whatever it takes to get some freedom. Whatever it takes to get some freedom. I had a buddy, again, I'm kind of staying in the pornography realm of things because I might have toiled some things up today for some people. If you struggle with the internet and pornography, there are so many tools out there to be able to help you with that. There's one thing that we just bought for my house for a multitude of reasons. This Disney Circle machine, it's like $99 that you can get through Amazon, that you can set your hours for how long your kids are on or how long you're on. It can monitor what everybody's on. It can block out things. And he got it, and he started messing around with it, and it took and put the parental guidelines in place when it came to pornography, and then went to Google and Googled porn videos blonde. And it came up and Google told him there were no videos on the internet for porn videos blonde. He just fixed the whole nation, I guess. But what the computer was saying is, I can't see any of that anymore. You can't see any of that anymore. And you might feel like, well, I'm not a kid. No, but you might be out of control. And don't keep that password where you can give yourself 5-minute windows. Give that password to your spouse or to a friend and say, I'm struggling and I need your help and accountability. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. If your family's going to bed, take the laptop, lock it in a safe so that you're not tempted. Whatever it takes. Set healthy boundaries that are going to make that difference. Get God's heart for others. You know what you can't do is continue lusting if you see people like Jesus does. You can't be trashing people at work while you're going up the corporate ladder if you look at the people that you're crushing like Jesus does. You can't continue on self-pleasing if you see others that you're hurting as God's people. There is nothing that ruins a porn movie more than stopping going, she's God's child. He's God's child. And she is God's child. And they're lost. And they need Jesus. Wow, that ruined that film, didn't it? Good. Because Jesus is crying, reaching, desperate to reach them. And there is no such thing as a victimless crime when it comes to lust. There simply is not. Build or change your team. Get some people around you that are supportive, not just in that area, but in any area. We were talking about this in youth group this past Wednesday night, of how important it is for your closest friends to be people that are driving each other forward. And I shared with them, and I think I mentioned maybe just a couple of weeks ago here, of Chip Ingram sharing a quote of, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And again, that's not a junior high or high school comment. That's all of us. Show me who you surround yourself, who your close personal people, and I'll show you what your future looks like. Some of us need to build teams around us for support and encouragement. And some of us need to look around at the people that we're investing into and realize that they can be friends, but they shouldn't be my best friends, and I need to recreate a new team. I need to recreate a new team. Because while we need to minister to everybody, you might be feeding something that needs ministered to in you. And then the last one is simply crucify it. Crucify it. Jesus took it on the cross. Scripture tells us he's more than happy to take it from us if we would give it to him, and he will nail it to the cross. But we need Christ. There's no way that we can do this on our own.